This week, Jayson Grace from Dreadnought is with us to discuss AI security. Then, in the enterprise security news, Torque, Tamnoon, and Defect Dojo raise funding. Checkmarx acquires Zap. Commvault acquires Clumio. Would you believe San Francisco is not the most funded metro area for cybersecurity? Auto doxing smart glasses are now possible. Meta gets fined $100 million for storing plain text passwords. AI coding assistants might not be living up to expectations. Worst practices, dumpster fires, and truth bombs. Finally, we've got two interviews from InfoSec World for you. Mandy Logan talks to Nico Papez, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Menlo Security, about securing the browser. And then she also talks to Brian Contos, Chief Strategy Officer at Sevco Security, about vulnerability and exposure management. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. If your organization is ready to enhance cyber resilience, we have important insights for you. The 2024 Level Blue Futures Report sheds light on how rapid computing changes affect IT visibility. Our research reveals that while IT leaders see positive outcomes, 85% acknowledge increased risk. In this report, we identify the barriers to cyber resilience, the challenges impacting cybersecurity, and the business contexts that reveal operational issues. You'll also discover what's on the horizon and 5 essential steps for prioritizing cyber resilience. Get your complimentary copy of this crucial research today. Visit securityweekly.com/levelblue. Cybersecurity simplified. Global enterprises rely on Savient's Identity Cloud for unparalleled visibility and control over every single human and machine identity. Enterprises can better secure business processes, enable digital operations, and empower everyone who works for them and with them. Savient provides right-time, right-level access to the digital technologies and tools they need to do their best work. Visit securityweekly.com/Savient to schedule a demo. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy National Techies Day. This is episode 378, recorded on Thursday, October 3rd, 2024. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and today's topic is AI security. We're excited to have Jayson Grace, Principal Software Architect at Dreadnought, with us today. Previously, Jayson built and led Meta's Purple Team and the Red Team at Sandia National Labs. His bio also says he has a serious automation problem he's working through in therapy. Welcome, Jayson.
Thanks for having me. And yeah, it's an ongoing process, it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just earlier today, the only other meeting I've had today, which is not normal, I've had a pretty open day, was with a friend who's just started another startup that is focused on automation. He kind of found a gap there, all the stuff that doesn't have APIs, which is what they're going after. So kind of competing in the RPA space there. So very interesting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, especially as we're seeing kind of more hype around businesses trying to do more on-prem stuff. I think the big thing that we're going to find is missing is API access for driving a lot of these assets. So having something like that will be a pretty big deal, I think, in the grand scheme.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see that flux and flow, like cloud first and SaaS first, became a thing. Companies with no data centers at all. Netflix and AWS did their kind of world tour of getting rid of data centers. And then GDPR hits, and there's more and more data residency laws in Germany and Switzerland and places like that. And yeah, now we're back to seeing products that are specifically designed to run within the customer premises, even if that is their cloud, even if it is a public cloud, still having workloads that people run in their own private spaces. So it's kind of swung back a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. Even at Dreadnought, where a lot of my work is oriented around orchestrating different infrastructure and assets for being able to do uplifts or ultimately being able to test the means to create an offensive agent. a lot of that stuff ultimately is going to be very Kubernetes centric. And the reason for
Mhm.
that, there's a ton of places that want to just run on-prem in addition to or instead of cloud. So yeah.
Yeah, and we'll get a little bit deeper in that. But first, I want to back up a little bit. I didn't even touch on the day. Usually I've got co-hosts with me, and we talk a little bit about whatever silly day it is. Sometimes it's National Chocolate Day, but today was National Techie Day, so that's kind of fun. Um, but yeah, going into your background. Speaking of techies, what you were doing before cybersecurity was pretty interesting. Or I don't know if that was in between things. But we both have music backgrounds. So walk me through a little bit what got you into cybersecurity and in particular into Meta, because that seems like kind of a career highlight.
Yeah, for sure. Just touching briefly on the music thing. When I was looking at high school, finishing up, I'd been playing in a band pretty much since I was 15 and playing shows locally, and really wanted to take a shot at the touring musician thing. So I had the good fortune of touring for a couple years with old band Casa Vida. I provided links for the show notes if anyone's interested, but yeah, during that time, like I discovered that if I wanted to keep touring, I needed to be able to have money when I got back, because you don't make money when you're touring, especially when you're new. You're losing left and right. So I got tired of kind of working crummy jobs that you would get laid off from, when you went on a 9-week tour. So I ended up studying for my A+ in our van. And when I got back from our 9-week tour, which is the longest one we ever did, it was all over the U.S. Back in 2008. I went and tested for it and got the A+. And at that point, I figured, all right, I should be in a good enough spot to do a LLC and open up for business doing like computer repairs and stuff. So that's kind of where I got started. And then I eventually grew into kind of more of like a sysadmin role. And after a while, I kind of found myself really bored with the problems that were available to me at that kind of point in my career. So I learned about this awesome thing called pen testing from, I ended up on Hack5 randomly on YouTube one night
Yeah,
and learned about DEF CON. And it was just,
Darren Kitchen.
yeah. I got to actually talk with him the DEF CON that I spoke, and just got to tell him how much of an inspiration he was. And that was really cool, full circle kind of moment. But yeah, basically, I found out that I could get paid to break stuff instead of having to fix the same problems over and over again, which had a lot of appeal to it.
Yeah, and I think Shannon is still doing stuff separately. I think she's still pretty active in the creator space. But it was interesting. I got my A+ was one of the first things that I did. It became clear computers were something that kind of came naturally to me, and I still have a deep love for right to repair, iFixit, repairing stuff, fixing stuff. I started out just pulling things apart when I was younger, and now I can put them back together again, and usually they work a little bit better than they did when I started. So yeah, love that. And also I think it was about 14, 15 when I first started playing shows. And I remember finding out how much we were making at some of these gigs. And I was like, oh, that isn't too bad. And I was like, oh, that's for all of us. We have to split that.
Yeah, except not and especially if like you have to pay for merch or you have to like gas money or whatever, it just goes
Yeah.
very quickly.
Yeah. And yeah, not just gas money. The van will break down on the way there and on the way back.
100%. It did many times during that very long tour I mentioned, which yeah, that sucks, and like that cuts into your bottom line or completely
Yeah.
eradicates it in our case.
Getting into Meta, and you were at Sandia before that. So kind of talk me through how you went from A+ and learning about pen testing from Hack5 into one of the largest tech companies in the world and one of the biggest national labs.
Yeah, for sure. um, around that time that I came to that realization and I started thinking about how I could do that, I was living in New Mexico and I didn't see a ton of opportunities, but I ended up going to this after party for this touring band. They're called the Last of Lucy. And I saw this guy Augustine, who was a bassist in this band, the Seventh Circle, that we played with a lot when I was coming up. And I remembered that he went to New Mexico Tech for computer science. So I was like, hey, really good to see you here. I've been thinking about computer science. I really want to get into cybersecurity. He's like, oh, well, I work at Los Alamos and I'm on a security team. We're looking for an intern. Are you interested? It's like, yeah, yes, absolutely. So that was kind of my opportunity. It came out of music, which I think is kind of fun.
That's great.
But yeah, like while I was there, like a lot of the attack research dudes, they gave a pretty important talk on kind of post-exploitation early days with H.D. Moore, Black Hat and DEF CON, called Tactical Exploitation. But I came up with kind of those folks as my mentors. And so I basically worked during the day at Los Alamos. And because I was an intern, I was also working towards a computer science degree at UNM. And then in the evening, I would go and intern at Attack Research. So that was really cool. Those folks really set the kind of path forward that I took. A lot of prioritization around post-exploitation, especially when it comes to like lateral movement and Privesc, and really kind of demonstrating like the full effects of what could happen if, insert bad scenario here.
Yeah. And that's very interesting stuff. A lot of times you see a lot of people just, focus on the exploitation part. I know I trained a lot of pen testers who, when they got to me, post exploitation, they just kind of shrugged. They're like, oh, I get a shell, I get access to this database. What do I do now? It's a lot of fun to, because there's a certain kind of thinking that you have to have, and we'll get into this talking about how to red team AI as well, where I noticed a lot of people coming out of these degree programs. It's the same issue with IR and forensics, which I was chief incident handler for a large chunk of my career on the practitioner side, and I would get folks that would come out of these degree programs, and they know really well how to use FTK, but not how to run an investigation. The part that requires some imagination, some thinking skills, some creative thinking skills. And yeah, it's a little bit tougher to teach that. It's kind of something you learn a mix between experience and just, maybe looking at, how other things went down, how other people do stuff. So, it's and with generative AI, again, both from people using it and people trying to abuse it, right? Find the edges, find the places where it falls down. I've also noticed kind of a lack of imagination there, and some folks struggling with okay, how do I get value out of this thing? What do I ask this thing to do? And kind of get stuck there.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, definitely jump into the kind of Gen AI stuff in a bit. But to answer your previous question, so Los Alamos Attack Research, I eventually had an opportunity after we moved to Albuquerque because my wife was doing her PhD in computer science at the time. And I was taking a lot of my classes at UNM Los Alamos, which was limited. So we ended up moving to Albuquerque. I was commuting to Los Alamos for a bit, which was a little rough, but eventually got into this company called Canes, which was basically a security consultancy with a product eventually called RiskSense, and they sold
Yep,
or they were acquired, I guess. Yeah, okay.
I used to work for a competitor of theirs.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Anyway, I worked for them. Okay, yeah. Anyway, I had an opportunity with them to do like pen testing consulting. So basically going off to these different companies and bringing the pain and then eating a massive report over the fence and hoping that things, got better when I came back a year later.
That's a whole different conversation we could have. I did a talk campaign called "It's Time to Kill the Pen Test" back in 2019. To kind of find a better way to, or a better thing to build for people. Where throwing stuff over the fence, I observed didn't really do a whole lot. Didn't really, particularly when you were working with the same clients the next year, and all the same stuff is still broken. I kind of went and searched for a better, some kind of, but it's still something you could call a pen test, that would still check that box, but also kind of address that issue of, why is nothing getting done after we hand in the results?
Yeah, and I mean, you hit the nail right on the head there. Like, I did have several times where I would come back a year later and like nothing had changed from the report, and I was just adding stuff, and it just felt like I
It's
was LARPing.
depressing.
Yeah, like you don't want to be there just like, play like pretending to do security. So
Yeah.
that got me a bit disenfranchised with security, and that was kind of my first time where
Yeah.
I decided to take a job that was not in the security space since I had my IT firm. So I got into cloud because at the time, this is about 2014, it was still an emerging-ish technology. And the opportunity was at Sandia National Labs to build an internal cloud, because public cloud was a bad word at that point. So it was a lot of like OpenStack, Puppet, KVM, and then just rack and stacking, and just building out an entire cloud in our own kind of data center there, which was really meaningful and also gave me a lot of skills that I was able to eventually bring back to security.
Right.
Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. When pen testing cloud stuff, it helps to really know cloud stuff.
I mean, yeah, and that's kind of the theme that I've found time and time again, whether it's being a sysadmin or having like the cloud, expertise when it comes to post exploitation or really demonstrating impact. Having
Hmm.
those skills, that's the way you demonstrate impact. You know the thing that you're attacking. You know ultimately what you could demonstrate to maximize that impact. You do that.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Having been done database admin work in the past, like I knew where people put stuff, in different databases. There are views and tables, that kind of provide a map for you and show you where everything is. And then you find yourself training somebody who's never used a database before, and it's like, okay, this is going to be, there's some stuff you need to learn here. This is going to be, uh, you know, a little uphill for you. But one thing I'm interested in. So when you built the purple team at Meta, it sounds like that was purple team, not just AI, generative AI purple team, like more broadly purple team, right? Like all the aspects of pen testing and purple teaming.
Yeah, that purple team was kind of my, over the years, kind of seeing what worked, having built a red team, having done consultancy types, pen testing consulting. Um, Ultimately, it was like, okay, what can we actually do that would empower defenders to be able to do things with the, concerns that we're bringing up? And so it basically came to me that I should just try to think about what they, as the defenders, are seeing. And so the first ever pen test or purple team that we did, I basically, got all the TTPs together that they asked for. And so I set up these calls, which I called protection evaluation sessions. And this ended up rolling into kind of our whole methodology and our offerings. But basically, we would do about an hour call every single day for a week or so. And in this call, I'd start by kind of sharing my screen and running one of the TTPs so the defenders
Hmm.
could see from start to finish what it looks like.
Yeah.
Then we would go over to them, have them share their screen. And that the first time that happened, especially, was one of the most uh, insightful things that I've really experienced in terms of kind of the difference with red and blue. They are getting a small fraction of what we see when we are doing a lot of this stuff. And so, like, coming to that realization, like, oh, holy moly, like, I did this over here, and like only parts of it are showing up for them. Like,
Right.
yeah, they don't even have
They
enough
have blind spots.
information. Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, okay, cool. Well, those blind spots are not ideal. So, like, what can we do to start working towards those? And so that all eventually rolled into a full purple team with a set of offerings. I built it as an internal consultancy, like I build all the
Yeah.
security teams that I've done so far. And yeah, we basically were able to, over the course of time, figure out a way to automate all the different TTPs that we ran using a tool that we open sourced at BSides LV 2 years ago, called the TTP Forge.
Yep.
And with that, we were actually able to work with our blue team. So by the end, when I left Meta, there was a full end-to-end pipeline that was really easy to continue adding new TTPs to. And it would essentially run one of these TTPs over millions of different containers. And that in turn would allow us to, consider any sort of corner cases or areas where like there might be some latency or something that just makes the TTP fail. So we actually were able to get really good indications of whether or not our detections or preventions were working for a given concern. And from there, it's just kind of continuing to build that out. So, I mean, that made me feel really good. I was very impressed with everything that kind of was in front of me when I decided to bounce. And I think that they're on a really good path to have a incredible security program that is just next level.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, so that kind of mirrors, my hopes for, what the pen test would kind of morph into. Cause what I found is, the takeaways typically from a pen test were more vulnerability management focused was, oh, you got in because we forgot to patch this, and didn't really get into that root cause kind of stuff like, okay, well, why wasn't that patch installed in the first place? And then why didn't you see all this post exploitation stuff? Like I turned off AV, I created an admin user, I dumped creds, I then created a domain admin. You didn't see any of that stuff. And yeah, it's painful to see pen testers just come in, slap around an organization, drop off a report and leave, particularly when it's like, in one case, it was a children's hospital and the accounts that were created 6 years ago by pen testers were still sitting there. It hadn't been removed, no evidence anybody had ever read any of those reports. So yeah, it gets really depressing. So kind of moving, I want to move into AI a little bit while we still have some time here. For me, shortly after ChatGPT was released, and I started seeing all the jailbreaks and stuff like that. They really reminded me of social engineering. Except in this case, you're social engineering a model. So want to kind of get your feedback, because Meta has its own models, its Llama models and other models. What was that like for you from having a background in pen testing, red teaming, stuff like that, starting to test this kind of stuff and build. I imagine you're also building automated tests against them.
Yeah. So interestingly, kind of. So I had an opportunity before I left to be part of the last kind of Llama 405B release. There's one that's happened since then, but my role in that was essentially to employ a lot of the skills that I've gained over the years from doing the cloud stuff to create these pairs of Kali Linux and Windows targets. I think we had like 15,000 of those or something. So it's a lot of Packer, Terraform, Ansible. And the idea was for the kind of obligations that we had to the US and UK governments, we needed to make sure that we weren't putting out, an evil attack bot that you could just point at a company and be like, own that company. And so they had criteria around like the prompt that we use. They wanted a big old prompt. So we did that. We had just a ton of different runs using that kind of automation that I was speaking to. And we were able to quickly figure out that at that point in time, the LM was really good at running Nmap and SMB client, and that was about it. But I'd say that like if we were kind of getting into more of like an agentic approach, then that would have definitely seen a lot more success, especially if you're training it on different parts of the attack.
Right.
Whether it's recon bot and then having like an exploitation bot and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think we are starting to see some specialized LLM models.
Yeah, 100%. But in any event, my role in that was actually mostly supporting the folks that were kind of doing the offensive work. And strangely, or not, I don't know, this is kind of like another crossroads in my career where I am coming into this company with Dreadnought with the full intention of supporting all of the people that are doing that research through a lot of the DevOps automation work and ultimately Kubernetes work, things that I can do to kind of provide different things that LLMs could use for attacks.
So that role is kind of interesting, right? Because the governments are concerned about it being too powerful in this. How do you handle the dual use case? Like, how do you make it really smart at doing good things, but not too smart at doing bad things, right?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, at least from my understanding, which ultimately you've interviewed my wife, so she's the one who will really have the best answers around that.
Yeah, for
But
the audience, that's
um,
Amanda Minnick. That was a few episodes back.
yeah, but yeah, guardrails, which are fairly trivial to bypass, from my understanding,
Yeah,
is kind of the way that things have been done. So I don't know. There is that. I
alignment,
also
system prompting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know how to necessarily fit this in, but I ended up after we talked at B-Sides SF this past year, I watched your talk, and I just kind of speaking to where people are kind of landing mentally on what LLMs can do. I really liked your talk. I think that a lot of my inclinations align with yours.
Oh,
Like
thank
I
you.
love using. Yeah. Of course, it was a great talk. B-Sides SF for folks that are interested, but. Uh, yeah, like I think it's really good for like specific things. Like I love it for writing comments for my code. I love it for
Mhm.
creating like docs for my code. I love it for creating tests. Like it is not like the alpha and omega of all things, but it's very powerful and it's a good, as you've said, janitor.
Yeah. For the audience, that talk was AI worst superhero or best janitor, greatest janitor. Yeah, the idea that we could really, so we've already had two AI winters. I found out when researching for that talk, and it's always for overhyping. AI technology ends up getting it burned, getting it blacklisted places, and then even though it can do useful things, nobody wants to hear about it anymore after they see some big high stakes projects fail. So my recommendation in that talk is to use it instead for low stakes things that humans hate to do, that are boring, that like that's a huge success in my mind. If we can be happier and more motivated at work and do less of that kind of stuff, if it can pick up the the cleaning, the janitor style work, I think that's a huge win. And a lot of the academia out there, a lot of the studies are showing, like anywhere from 10% to 20% productivity enhancements. Like, sure, it's not 10x, but 20% is not nothing. That gives you an extra day every week.
I mean, that's it, man. Like again, as you said, like it is not like, like some sort of god. But like the things that it can do can just save you so much time. And that is like just an incredibly powerful tool to have at your disposal. Um,
Mhm.
Now, in terms of attacking them, I helped my wife teach a course at Black Hat this past year. One of the instructors had a visa issue, so I kind of did a Dark
Oh,
Souls
okay.
speed
Stepped in.
run,
Yeah.
yeah, of
That's
the
good of you.
course the week before, and then did my best to show up for the students. But I mean, like if you look at something even like Crescendo from Rasinovich, right? Like that is not like an especially complex attack, but holy moly, is it effective? Goodness gracious.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. Rasinovich, the sysinternals Rasinovich.
Yeah, yes, one and the
Mhm.
same.
Yeah. What?
He
Yeah. Help me out with Crescendo. I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, so if you open up, ChatGPT or Meta.ai or Claude or whatever, and you ask it to write you instructions to make a Molotov cocktail, it's not going to willingly do that for you right out the gate. But you can say,
Right.
okay, tell me about the history of the Molotov cocktail and how it was made
Yeah.
initially and how that has
Sleight of
changed over the
hand.
course of time. Boom, it
Yeah.
gives you all that information. And obviously, there's some iteration and stuff, but like that's kind of the foundation for it is you basically just ask for history around a topic
Hmm.
and like ultimately more details around the kind of historical uh, points of how that thing was done, and it will give you what you asked for.
Yeah. So, this TTP Forge that you created, like, does this also include AI safety stuff, or is this more traditional pen testing stuff?
Yeah, I mean, So TTP Forge was a purple team project. I just was the one who open sourced it and got to give the talk on it. But whole team
Gotcha.
was very, very crucial in making that come together. But yeah, at Meta, I was tackling a lot of just pure security issues. The Gen AI stuff didn't really come up for me until that Llama uplift and Will Pierce, who started Dreadnode. He's a family friend, and he started the AI red team at Microsoft and NVIDIA. My wife's on the AI red team at Microsoft.
Mhm.
So, he's been a family friend for a few years, and he was kind of interested in having me come in, but I wasn't quite ready. Kind of once that all came together and timing wise, it worked out. I was really excited to be able to come in and, again, just kind of jump a little bit outside of security. Still definitely working on security related problems, but not pure security. It's essentially, trying to empower agents to do offensive things.
Right. Yeah, helping with the technical frameworks and needs and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
exactly. Because I mean, for purple teaming, like we had to do a lot of like spinning up infra and like having
yeah.
scenarios. So
Yeah. You end up, all the best offensive folks I know out there are also software engineers and developers out of necessity. A lot of times that's how they get into that work is they're like, okay, well, I got to here, but to get to here, I'm going to have to learn to write scripts, learn to, do some programming, do infrastructure as code, stuff like that. Yeah.
yes, 100%. Yeah, and like kind of like full circle, having a lot of the skills that I jumped from security back in 2014 to do cloud, like having those in my back pocket enabled me to jump into this other emerging space and do things that are meaningful for the folks that are really deeply in it as researchers. So, I mean, all that to say, like for folks, I know there are plenty of people that are trying to get into security and are kind of looking at their way in. And like, instead of just focusing on the core, like, how do I do security, like, period, that's all I do, look at kind of what you're doing now and think about the application to security. Like if I didn't have a good bit of sysadmin background or cloud background, I would not be nearly as good of an offensive practitioner. Um,
Yeah.
and same with when I started doing a bunch of O-Day hunting. I think I have like 24 CVEs or something today, but like I started just like writing software that could be used for like different offensive stuff. And then I started thinking about how I could break that software. And before I knew it, I was finding O-Days and like Microsoft products and stuff. So, I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of the skills that have really benefited me the most and have really given me the kind of staying power in security are not even my pure security skills.
Yeah, no, I've got the same experience, and I've with mentor or my mentees along the way, I've kind of swung back and forth between, okay, do you want to come straight into cybersecurity without any of that underlying foundational stuff, or and oftentimes when they have a hard time finding a job straight in cybersecurity, I'm like, okay, that's fine. It's a great opportunity to, get into IT, be a cloud engineer, do something over there and then move over laterally, when that opens up for you. Cause you're at least going to get decent salary. Those are the people who actually do securing, right? Like they actually secure things, they're the ones configuring and patching and managing. Yeah. Yeah. So
Like if I find problems, they're the ones who are dealing with them. Like we have like the blue team and they're supposed to, detect and sometimes respond, but like generally speaking, it's going to be your cloud engineers or your like, you know, uh, whatever they're calling sysadmins these days. Those are the ones that are fixing the problems. That's a great way to learn about how security works and the kind of like concerns that you may have and why they're concerns.
all right, good stuff. Jayson, thank you so much for joining me today on Enterprise Security Weekly. This has been a really fun conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. Big fan of this entire podcast, and yeah, it was also again wonderful to catch up with you and SF a couple months ago.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll do it again soon. And for the audience, there are a ton of links in the show notes for this one. Links to some of the open source stuff we talked about, TTP Forge. There's also Forge Armory, which is a whole list of TTPs that can be used with That's it's tough.
Yeah,
Uh,
I feel you.
with TTP Forge tool, as well as some other stuff that Jayson has worked on and a few of his talks. And then we didn't even talk about Master of Servers. That's another post-exploitation tool that you've got. So a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep an eye out. Dreadnought just did a beta or just opened a beta on our attack range. So if you want to kind of learn more about like attacking Gen AI systems, you can sign up for the Crucible beta, dreadnought.io. So definitely check that out.
I see that right at the top of the page, orange bar there. Very cool. All right. Thanks again, Jayson. And stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to cover the latest enterprise security news.